She stood alone in the glittering ballroom while everyone whispered, and not a single soul spoke to her. The candlelight caught the silk of the ladies' gowns, the flash of jewels, the swirl of dancers, but none of it touched Alara. She was pressed into the corner near a great marble pillar, her back so straight it ached, her hands clasped tightly over the plain muslin of her gray gown. She did not belong here. She was not a guest. She was the companion to the Duchess of Ashworth, a quiet shadow meant to hold shawls and pour tea and vanish into the wallpaper. But the real pain did not come from the whispers. It came from the center of the dance floor, where the Duke of Ashworth himself was spinning Lady Cecily Wrenwood beneath the chandelier. He was tall and golden and coldly beautiful, his jaw sharp as cut glass, his dark hair swept back, his movements precise. He looked at Lady Cecily with a polite, distant smile. He did not look at Alara. He never did. A footman passed with a tray of champagne. He sidestepped Alara as if she were furniture. The whispers swelled behind fans. "Is that the Wentworth girl, the one whose father?" A companion now, can you imagine, from that bloodline to holding a duchess's handkerchief. She's lucky the dowager took pity on her at all. After the scandal, she should be grateful to sleep under a roof like Ashworth Hall. Alara heard every word. She had learned long ago to keep her eyes down and her mouth still, but inside, something small and fragile crumpled. She had been waiting. For 3 years beneath this same roof, she had been waiting for the Duke to remember. He did not remember. She lifted her chin just enough to watch him again. The dance ended. The Duke bowed to Lady Cecily, and as he straightened, his gaze swept across the room. For one breathless second, his eyes met Alara, cold, gray, unseeing. He looked through her as if she were glass, then turned away. Her heart, already bruised, gave a final, quiet shudder. She had been waiting for love that would never come. The Duke of Ashworth's name was Caelan, and once, 20 years ago, he had been a boy with scraped knees and a pocket full of wildflowers who had promised a little girl that he would marry her. Alara remembered everything. She had been 6, he had been 9. Her family's estate had bordered Ashworth's northern lands, and the children had run wild together through apple orchards and meadows. She remembered the day he had carved their initials into the soft wood of a locket, a tiny, clumsy thing, and hung it around her neck with a piece of leather cord. "This means we belong to each other," he had said. "When I am Duke and you are grown, I will come back and marry you. I swear it on my mother's soul." She had believed him with the whole of her heart. She had hidden the little locket beneath her dress every day since. But then the scandal had come. Her father, a respected baron, had been accused of fraud and theft, accusations that spread like fire through the ton. Overnight, the Wentworths were ruined. Her father died of shame and a weak heart. Her mother followed within the year. Alara was 12 years old, orphaned, penniless, and untouchable. The Ashworth family, still powerful and proud, cut all ties. The old Duke, Caelan's father, made certain the connection was erased. The betrothal that had once been whispered of between the two houses was forgotten like morning mist. Alara was sent to a distant cousin who treated her as a servant. She grew up in cold rooms, mending clothes and swallowing her grief. And all the while she kept the locket hidden, a secret ember of hope that one day, somehow, Caelan would find her and remember. That day never came. Instead, when she was 22, the Dowager Duchess of Ashworth, a distant relation by marriage, offered her the position of companion. It was charity with a sharp edge. Alara accepted because she had nowhere else to go, and because a foolish, aching part of her soul still longed to be near him. She arrived at Ashworth Hall 3 years ago expecting recognition. She received nothing. Caelan was no longer the boy who had picked flowers. He was a man of marble, shaped by duty and the death of his father shortly after the scandal. He was cold, measured, and utterly remote. He looked at her the first day with polite disinterest and said, "You are the new companion. I trust you will serve my mother well." Not a flicker, not a breath. The boy who had sworn an oath on his mother's soul had vanished into this stranger's face. Still she waited. Every day she hoped for a sign, a lingering glance, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. She wore the locket beneath her bodice, close to her skin, as if its presence could call to him. She made herself useful, graceful, invisible. She learned his habits. She folded his forgotten cravats. She left fresh flowers in the library because he once mentioned liking the scent of lavender. She thought maybe, if she was just patient enough, the memory would surface. It never did. And tonight, watching him dance with Lady Cecily, hearing the dowager speak pointedly of wedding dates and alliances, Alara understood at last that hope had been a slow poison. She was nothing to him. She was a servant with a hidden piece of wood and a child's dream that had died years ago without her noticing. The whispers continued around her. She turned and walked out of the ballroom, and not a single person marked her leaving. The days that followed were gray and silent. Alara rose before dawn, helped the dowager with her correspondence, arranged flowers, mended lace, and smiled with a face that revealed nothing. Inside, something had begun to change. The hope that had sustained her for so long crumbled into dust, and in its place grew a strange, hollow resolve. She stopped waiting. She stopped lifting her eyes every time Kaelin entered a room. She stopped leaving lavender in the library. She stopped hoping that a forgotten promise could conjure love from a man who did not even see her. Instead, she turned her attention outward. Ashworth Hall was a great estate with dozens of tenant families, and the dowager had little interest in them. Alara began walking to the village in her few free hours. She visited the sick, brought broth and bread to new mothers, sat beside elderly farmers and listened to their stories. She wrote letters for those who could not write. She helped a young girl learn her letters in a smoky cottage. No one in the great house noticed her small disappearances. She was so insignificant that her absence was invisible. But among the tenants she became known. They called her the quiet lady with gentle hands. For the first time in years, Alara felt a flicker of purpose that had nothing to do with Kaelan. One afternoon, as she walked back through the estate's eastern woods, she met Mr. Alden Thorne, the Duke's new steward. He was a man of perhaps 30. With kind brown eyes and a direct manner that held no artifice. He had seen her helping the blacksmith's son with a fever and stopped her on the path. "You are Lady Alara, are you not?" he bowed. "I wanted to thank you. The tenants speak of you with great warmth. It is rare to see a gentlewoman care so genuinely." Alara flushed. "I am no gentlewoman, sir. I am merely the Duchess's companion." "Titles do not determine kindness," he said simply, "and kindness is a rare enough treasure to be noticed." That was the first conversation Alara had shared with anyone that felt like sunlight in years. Alden Thorne did not look at her with pity or contempt. He saw her, and over the following weeks he began to find reasons to walk the same paths. He brought her a small book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. He asked her opinion on the new drainage system for the South Fields. He laughed, a warm, easy sound, when she pointed out a family of ducklings in the reeds. Alara did not love him. She did not allow herself to think in such terms. But his company was a balm, a reminder that she was still a woman worthy of conversation and respect. Her posture began to straighten. The permanent ache behind her ribs eased just a little. Kaelan noticed nothing. Why would he? He was consumed with the business of the dukedom and the polite pursuit of Lady Cecily. At dinner, which Alara attended only to assist the dowager, he rarely spoke to her. If his eyes ever brushed her way, they passed over her like a shadow. But then one evening, something shifted. It was a small thing. Alara had been in the village later than usual, and she returned through the garden door just as Kaelan was crossing the great hall. Her hair was wind-tossed, her cheeks pink from the cold, and she was smiling faintly, still thinking of old Mr. Potter's joke about his stubborn goat. The smile lingered on her lips, a soft, private expression she never wore inside the house. Kaelan stopped mid-stride. He stood in the corridor, half in shadow, and stared at her as if he had never seen her before. Alara's smile died the instant she noticed him. She curtsied quickly, her eyes down. "Your Grace." He did not answer. She risked a glance upward and found his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that stole her breath. It was not the cold, distant look she knew. It was something sharper, something searching. Then the moment shattered. Lady Cecily's voice called from the drawing room, and Kaelin turned away without a word. But Alara's heart, which she had worked so hard to silence, gave a single traitorous thud. She crushed it down and hurried to her room. She would not hope, she had learned, she would not break herself again. The weeks that followed became a slow, strange unraveling. Kaelan began to notice her absences. He did not say so directly, but he asked his mother one morning in Alara's hearing, "Where is your companion? She is rarely about in the afternoons." The dowager waved a dismissive hand. "Walking in the village, I believe. She has become quite the little saint among the tenants, a harmless hobby." Kaelin's expression flickered, but he said nothing more. Still, Alara felt his eyes on her more often. At dinner, she caught him watching her from the corner of his eye while Lady Cecily chattered about fashions. Once, when a footman dropped a tray of glasses and everyone flinched, Alara instinctively knelt to help the flustered boy pick up the shards. Kaelin's voice cut through the noise, sharp and concerned. "Leave that. You will cut yourself." She looked up, startled. He was on his feet, his jaw tight. The entire room stared. Alara rose slowly, her fingers trembling. "I only wish to help." "It is not your duty to clean up broken glass," he said, his tone unreadable. Then he signaled another servant and sat down again, his face a mask. Lady Cecily laughed lightly. "Goodness, Ashworth, you sound positively husbandly, but she is only a companion after all." The words hung in the air like frost. Alara's cheeks burned. Kaelan did not correct Lady Cecily. He did not defend her. He simply resumed his meal, and the incident was forgotten by everyone except Alara, who carried the sting into the night. But something had cracked inside Kaelan. He could not name it. He told himself it was mere irritation that a servant in his household was wandering off without permission, but the truth was more unsettling. He had watched her smile in the garden, that private smile that held no fear and no deference, and it had lodged beneath his skin like a splinter. She never smiled at him like that. She never smiled at him at all anymore, he realized. She used to. There had been a time, he could not pinpoint when her eyes had followed him with a warmth that had been almost palpable. He had ignored it then. It had seemed irrelevant, but now it was gone, and the absence of it grated on him. He began to watch her more closely. He noticed the quiet grace with which she moved, the intelligence that flashed briefly when she read aloud to his mother, the surprising depth of her knowledge about estate management when Alden Thorne mentioned crop rotations at dinner. She corrected the steward gently on a detail about the tenants' water rights, and Thorne had looked at her with unconcealed admiration. "You have an excellent understanding, Lady Alara," Thorne said, and his voice was warm in a way that made Kaelan's jaw clench. "She spent much time among the common people," the dowager said with a slight sneer. "One picks up such things." Alara did not flinch. She simply inclined her head and said nothing. Kaelan found himself wanting to hear her voice again. He wanted to see her smile, that real smile, not the polite mask she wore at the table. He did not understand why it mattered. He was betrothed to Lady Cecily in all but name. The papers were being drawn. His path was set. But one crisp autumn afternoon, everything tilted. He had ridden out to inspect the eastern boundary and came upon a clearing by the old oak where he had played as a boy. And there was Alara, sitting on a fallen log, her gray cloak pooled around her, and beside her sat Alden Thorne, their heads bent close together. Thorne was speaking, and Alara was laughing, a soft, bubbling sound that Kaelan had never heard from her. The steward reached out and gently brushed a leaf from her hair. Kaelan's vision went red at the edges. His hands tightened on the reins. He did not call out. He turned his horse and rode away so swiftly that the beast lathered. That night he could not sleep. He paced his study, tormented by an emotion he refused to name. She was his. The thought rose unbidden and shocking. She belonged in his house, under his protection, in his orbit. The idea of her laughing with another man, of that man touching her hair, was a knife twisting in his chest. But why? She was nothing to him. Wasn't she? He drank a glass of brandy and stared into the fire. Fragments of memory teased him, a sensation of sunlight, a childish giggle, the feel of small fingers tangled in his own. He had known a girl once before his father died, before the world turned gray. He could not quite grasp her face. It was lost in the haze of boyhood. He shook his head and forced the thoughts away. It was possessiveness, nothing more. He would ignore it. But fate had other plans. A week later, the dowager held a small dinner party to formally announce the impending betrothal. The great dining room blazed with candles. Lady Cecily sat beside Kaelan, radiant in rose silk. Alara, as usual, was placed at the far end of the table, nearly swallowed by the shadows, attending to the dowager's needs. The conversation swirled around wedding plans. Kaelan answered mechanically. His gaze kept drifting to the foot of the table, where Alara sat with her hands folded, her eyes lowered. She had grown thinner, he thought. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. She did not look at him once. Halfway through the meal, Lady Cecily, in a fit of careless cruelty, turned to Alara with a sweet smile. "And you, dear companion, do you never wish to marry? I imagine at your age and with your history, it must be difficult to attract a suitor." The table fell silent. The dowager stiffened but did not intervene. Kaelan's fingers tightened on his fork. Alara lifted her chin. Her voice was quiet and steady. "I have long accepted that marriage is not my path, my lady. I find purpose in other things." "How very noble," Lady Cecily simpered. "But every woman needs a husband's protection. Perhaps one of the tenant farmers would have you. I hear you are quite popular among them." A hot, surging anger flooded Kaelan's chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but Alara was already rising. "If you will excuse me," she said calmly, "I feel a headache coming on. I wish you all a pleasant evening." She curtsied and walked out of the room with her head high, and no one stopped her. Kaelan watched her go, and in that moment he felt a loss so acute it stole his breath. He found her an hour later in the empty conservatory, standing among the lemon trees, her back to the door. Moonlight silvered her hair. Her shoulders were trembling, though she made no sound. He approached slowly. "Lady Alara." She went still, her trembling stopped. She did not turn around. "I must apologize for Lady Cecily's remarks," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "They were unworthy of her and of this house." "There is no need, Your Grace." Her voice was like frost. She spoke only the truth as society sees it. "I am a woman of no consequence." "That is not true." She turned then, and the look she gave him was so full of weary resignation that he felt it like a blow. "Isn't it? I have lived under this roof for 3 years. I have been invisible. I have been convenient. I have been nothing. A single unkind word from your intended is hardly the wound that will break me." He faltered. "I have not been unkind to you." "You have been nothing to me," she said softly, "and that is so much worse." She walked past him and left him standing in the moonlit room, his heart pounding with something that felt terrifyingly like shame. That night Kaelan did not sleep at all. He sat in his study until dawn, turning her words over and over. He had been nothing to her, and yet somehow she had become something to him. The realization was a slow, painful unraveling. Over the next days he tried to bridge the distance. He sought her out with trivial questions. He complimented the flowers she had arranged. He invited her opinion on a letter to his solicitor. Each time she answered politely, distantly, and excused herself as soon as possible. She had learned to protect herself with walls of ice, and he could not find a foothold. Desperate and confused, he did something he had never done. He followed her. One afternoon he tracked her path to the village and stood in the shadow of a barn, watching her kneel beside a sick child, her hands gentle, her voice soothing. The child's mother wept with gratitude. Alara hugged her, whispering comfort. Kalen saw the pure, selfless grace of her, and his chest ached with a feeling he could no longer deny. He wanted to deserve her, but he had not even remembered her. The first crack in the wall came the day he found the locket. It was an accident. A small, worn wooden locket had slipped from Alara's pocket during one of her village visits, and Alden Thorne had picked it up. He brought it to Kalen's study, thinking it might be a tenant's trinket. "I found this on the path, Your Grace," Thorne said. "I believe Lady Alara dropped it. It seemed personal." Kalen took the locket. The moment his fingers closed around the worn wood, a jolt of recognition shot through him. He stared at the clumsy carving on its face, two tiny, intertwined letters. E.W. and K.A. Alara Wentworth. Kalen Ashworth. His blood went cold, then hot. He opened the locket with trembling hands. Inside, pressed flat, was a dried wildflower, so old it was nearly dust. And on the inner wood, in a child's uneven script, were the words, "When I am Duke and you are grown, I will marry you. I swear it." The study tilted. Kalen gripped the edge of his desk. Memories crashed over him like a wave: the orchard, the little girl with the serious gray eyes, the promise he had carved with his own pocket knife. He had been 9 years old. He had meant it with every fiber of his boyish soul. And then his father had died. The scandal, the chaos, the years of cold duty, he had forgotten. He had forgotten her. His throat closed. She had kept it. All this time she had worn his childish promise against her heart, waiting for him to remember. And he had looked through her as if she were glass. Agony ripped through him. He wanted to run to her, fall at her feet, beg. But he knew it was not enough. He needed to understand everything. He went to his mother. The dowager was in her sitting room, and when he strode in with the locket in his hand, her face went pale. "What happened to the Wentworths?" he demanded. "All of it, tell me now." The dowager's composure cracked. "Kalen, it is old history. Tell me." And so she did. She told him how his father, the late Duke, had discovered that Lord Wentworth was on the verge of exposing a financial scheme that could have ruined the Ashworth name. To protect the dukedom, the old Duke had fabricated evidence, spreading the accusations of fraud that destroyed the Wentworth family. He had silenced them, and in doing so, he had erased the childhood betrothal that might have tied his son to a ruined house. He had sent Alara away into poverty and told Kalen nothing. Kalen listened, and with every word a cold horror settled into his bones. His father had destroyed her. His family had destroyed her. And he, ignorant and arrogant, had let her serve his mother like a wraith, while she carried the proof of a love he had betrayed. He left his mother without a word. He found Alara in the garden, sitting alone on the stone bench beneath the willow tree. She did not rise when he approached. She barely looked at him. The walls around her were high and thick now. He sat beside her. He placed the locket into her hand. She inhaled sharply. Her fingers closed around it, and for a long moment she did not speak. Then she whispered, "Where did you find this?" "Thorne found it. He gave it to me." Kalen's voice was raw. "Alara, I remember everything." She did not weep. She did not collapse. She turned the locket over in her palm and said with a devastating calm, "It does not matter now." "It matters. It matters more than anything." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. "I know what my father did. I know the truth. You have been the victim of the greatest wrong my family ever committed, and I left you to suffer it alone. How can you not hate me?" She looked at him then, and her eyes were dry and deep as wells. "I did not hate you, Kalen. I loved you. For years I loved a boy who did not exist anymore. I waited. I hoped. But you never saw me. You looked at me and saw a servant, a shadow. And I finally understood that the promise was only a child's dream. I had to let it go to survive." He felt the words like a blade between his ribs. "I see you now." "Too late," she said, and her voice broke only a little. "I loved you too late to matter, and I have stopped waiting." She rose and walked away, and he let her go because he had no right to stop her. In the days that followed, Kalen threw himself into righting the wrongs. He broke his understanding with Lady Cecily publicly, an act that sent shockwaves through society. He began the legal process to clear the Wentworth name, unearthing the old evidence of his father's fraud. The scandal was enormous. The Ton buzzed with it. His reputation suffered, and he did not care. He tried to see Alara, but she had retreated even further. She stayed in the village more, helping the tenants, and when she was in the house, she spoke to him only when necessary. The distance was excruciating, and he deserved every inch of it. Then came the second reveal, the one that shattered what remained of his composure. Searching through old family documents for evidence to support the Wentworth petition, Kalen found a sealed letter in his father's private chest. It was addressed to him in his father's hand, and it had never been sent. He broke the seal with unsteady fingers. The letter was a confession. His father detailed in halting words how he had orchestrated the Wentworth's downfall. He expressed shame, fear, and a twisted hope that Kalen would never know. At the bottom, his father had written, "The girl, Alara, wrote to me once when she was 17. She begged for nothing but the truth. She said she had a token of a promise you made her as children, but that she would never reveal it to the world if it meant damaging your name. She was willing to carry the burden of her family's disgrace in silence forever to protect you. Such a soul is rare. If you ever find this, know that the greatest wrong was not the fraud, but what we took from her." Kalen read the words 3 times. She had known. She had known the truth about his father's crime for years, and she had said nothing. She had lived under his roof, served his mother, endured humiliation and neglect, all while holding the power to expose the Ashworth name and clear her own. She had not used it. She had protected him. The letter crumpled in his fist. He wept. He, the cold Duke of Ashworth, wept like a child in the dusty attic for the girl he had failed and the love he had thrown away. He found her in the only place she could ever be herself, the small cottage at the edge of the estate where she was nursing a sick old woman. He arrived in the rain, soaking wet, his eyes red-rimmed, and when she opened the door, she stared at him in shock. "Kalen, what happened?" He held out the letter, his hand shaking. You knew what my father did, and you stayed silent. Why, Alara?" She took the letter, read it, and her face went very still. "I found my father's old papers years ago before I came here. I pieced together the truth. I came to Ashworth Hall not just because I had nowhere else to go, but because I wanted to see if the boy I remembered was still inside the man you had become." She folded the letter carefully. "When I realized you had forgotten me, I decided to stay silent. Revealing the truth would have destroyed your family's honor, your position, everything you held dear. You had already lost your father. I could not take more from you, so I chose to bear it." "You sacrificed your entire future," he choked. "Your reputation, your chance at happiness, for a man who didn't even remember your name." "I did it for the boy who gave me a locket," she said quietly. "That boy deserved to be remembered. I hoped the man would one day find his way back." He fell to his knees on the cottage threshold, rain streaming down his face. "Alara, I am not worthy to speak to you, but I am begging. I am begging you to let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you gave. I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw you smile in the garden, and I have been a fool too arrogant to understand. I remember the promise. I remember the orchard. I remember the wildflowers. I remember everything, and I will never forget again. Please, please give me a chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved all along." She stood in the doorway, the rain a silver curtain between them. Her face was a battlefield of hope and fear. "I stopped waiting, Kalen. I don't know if I can start again." "Then don't wait," he said, his voice breaking. "Let me come to you. Let me prove it every day, without promises, without expectations. Just let me stay beside you." She looked at him for a long, breathless moment. Then, slowly, she stepped aside and led him into the warmth. It was not a fairy tale ending. The healing took months. The ton gossiped viciously, but Kalen shielded her from every barb. He cleared the Wentworth name publicly, restored a small portion of her family's honor, and married her in a quiet ceremony with only the tenants and Alden Thorne as witnesses. Thorne shook his hand afterward with genuine warmth, and Kalen felt no jealousy, only gratitude. Alara did not forget the pain. She carried it with her, but it softened over time, layered over by new memories, Kalen reading to her in the library, walking with her through the orchard, kneeling to tie a new ribbon around her wrist because the old locket now hung on a velvet cord. He never let a day pass without showing her she was seen. One evening, sitting together on the stone bench beneath the willow, she leaned her head against his shoulder and said, "I kept the locket all those years because I believed in something that seemed impossible." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "And I spent too many years blind, but I see you now, Alara. I will always see you." The willow branches swayed gently. The past lay behind them, acknowledged and grieved. The future stretched ahead, not perfect, but full of a quiet, enduring light. And the boy who had once carved a promise into wood finally, completely, came home.